Hello and welcome to Post Wrestling's coverage of Night 8 of the G1 Climax, the second night of a three-night spell for the tournament in Tokyo, and the second of two consecutive shows at the venerated Korakuen Hall. My name is Bruce Lord, and my co-host, well, he might walk alone for miles through a pit of danger when it comes to karaoke, but when it comes to the G1, we're teaming up to walk together through a slew of C and D block action. It's Post Wrestling's MMA expert, Eric Marcotte. Eric, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Glad to be back on these G1 shows and the first show we've recorded together, Bruce.
I know. I was sort of thinking, talking a little bit to WH about this and John a little bit about this, that the Forbidden Pour and whatnot was kind of our first chance to actually meet up and hang out in person. I feel like we're sort of, we're two people who are, I think, probably share a lot of similar opinions about New Japan and kind of what we like in the sort of wrestling that New Japan brings. But we've sort of always been like, a lot of like liking of each other's comments on the forum and stuff like that, but not an actual formal opportunity to really discuss the G1 or New Japan in general. So I'm really thrilled to be able to get to do that with you here today. On your previous one of these reviews that you were doing with WH, you were sort of talking a little bit about kind of the trade-offs of this format, 32 men, but the 20 minutes. So, okay, fine, more variety, more freshness, but maybe a bit of a trade-off in terms of match quality. You mentioned Shingo and Hanare, you're being your favorite match of the tournament up until this point, or that point rather. Any further thoughts about the tournament in general, the new format, the quality of wrestling that we're getting in this year's G1?
No, my thoughts pretty much hold true to this point. I feel as though with 8 matches a card as opposed to five as well, you are cramming more onto each show. And even aside from looking at the fact that we have more competitors in it each year, a lot of our stars, the guys who are the stars of those exciting G1s for years, they're getting older too. Hiroshi
Hmm.
Tanahashi is getting older. Tetsuya Naito is getting older. Hirooki Goto is getting older. Tomohiro Ishii is getting older, even though, well, I mean, he's still holding it down, as we'll get into later. But this is definitely a transitional period of sorts for New Japan, and as I said with WH, you're kind of sacrificing a bit of that overall quality for the greater good of the product in the long term, I think.
Yeah, and John and Wei were sort of talking about that, I believe, on their review of yesterday's show as well, sort of talking about how a lack of response, to some of these figures is going to be sort of the price you pay in the short to medium term. And we can sort of debate as to whether or not that is the sort of thing that Japan or New Japan should be doing when kind of around the across the country, right? Live houses in Japan are down right now. So okay, fine, maybe this is a good time to sort of shuffle the deck and have an experiment like the Sonata title reign, or is it no, you got to batten down the hatches and really shore up your draws and make sure that you're putting your established draws at the top of the card. Obviously, that's kind of a philosophical or business question that New Japan has come down on one side of. I. Not to go off on a whole other tangent about a wrestler who's not even on this card, but the Sonata title reign, I think, is something that we are sort of seeing undergo a bit of a trial by fire in this tournament as well, in terms of whether or not he is viewed as being somebody who's capable of main eventing a lot of these cards where there are theoretically more established names further down the card, and how do people respond to him as a main eventer. So lots of interesting questions on board in this year's G1. So, just a reminder, I know that it can be, get a bit confusing for all of our listeners about the various rating systems that all of your various reviewers are using. Like, look, at the end of the day, this just all of these things do come back to like a 5.5 star scale here. But we like to gussy it up and dress it up a little bit. I, of course, am using my Scotch-based rating system. Eric, in his previous show with WH, debuted his Okada scale, going all the way from epic 2-year title reign Okada at the 5-star end, all the way down to like a 1-star money clip Okada, or God forbid, just a complete dud Okato level there. It occurs to me, Eric, that it's a bit of a damn shame that you and Karen are not actually being paired up on any of these shows, because if you were to be on it together, we could have the Okada ice cream scale happening there. And as folks may remember, and as I'm pulling up here, for those of you watching on Twitter, years back, there was a Kazuchika Okada as ice cream Twitter account, which would link up the various looks and sartorial styles of the Rainmaker with various flavors of ice cream. So we are getting very, very abstract here off the top. I promise that there is actual wrestling to discuss on this card here. But it just occurred to me that, all of our various rating systems have kind of brought us into these very, very weird corners and interactions.
Yeah, we all have these like out there rating systems, but they all come back to the exact same 5 point scale that
Yep.
was that the coffee scale was initially used to take a break from. It's all the same. It all comes back to the same thing. But
Oh,
I hope it's
goodness.
not too hard to follow along with.
I mean, I think we can kind of break it down, and certainly the recommendations, the overall recommendations that we will be giving at the end of this show, I think should spell things out for folks who are looking to sample just a handful of G1 shows. We're kind of right in the thick of it right now. Like a 3-day run like this. This is exactly the sort of time when it's very easy. If you've got family obligations or a lot of work that you're bringing home with you or whatever, it's very easy to start falling behind in the G1. As of yet, I'm still completely up to date, and also with all of the reviews, but it's close. It's keeping all of my attention to stay up with it at this point. So our card from Korakuen begins with a C block match between Evil and Hanare. Evil sits at 2 wins and 1 loss. Hanare at 1 win and 2 losses heading into this match. As we all might presume or expect, Dick Togo jumps Hanare from behind with a chair well before the bell. Evil then smashes Hanare into the timekeeper's table and wraps the mic cable around Hanare's neck so that his bellows can be heard throughout Korakuen. Of course, it's the G1, so we brawl into the ring. And I will say that the crowd actually does really get up and respond to Hanare fighting back and smashing Evil's head into the west signs, the 4 cardinal signs that they have up there in Korakuen. The crowd is into this. So as much as I'm very, very quick to just throw House of Torture under the bus and point out that it often is just a real dearth of heat that's actually being generated here. The crowd was into Hanare for this, so I wanted to acknowledge that. Back in the ring, Hanare is in control. He gets a Berserker Bomb for 2, but some Dick Togo distraction lets Evil take Hanare on some more brawling through the crowd. They get up into the stands where we can see that this is a pretty full crowd. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but this looks comparable to, I believe, the 1,600 that they drew in Korakuen yesterday. Hanare powers out of Togo's garrote wire spot and brings Evil back into the ring for a fall-away slam for 2. Hanare powers through being tossed back first into an exposed turnbuckle, but Evil gets a fisherman buster for 2 after sending Hanare's injured neck into a padded buckle. That was the target for much of this match. Evil gets Darkness Falls for 2. A Nagata-style Justice Knee and Rampage takedown sets up Hanare for Streets of Rage, but Evil escapes it. Hanare gets a headbutt and a PK for 2. Evil claws at the eyes while Hanare is going for the Streets of Rage, and as a result, the ref is distracted. Hanare punches through the chair that Dick Togo is coming at him with in an actually pretty decent little, interference spot. But of course, we get the inevitable low blow, and everything is Evil to move Evil to 6 points at just over 12 minutes, while Hanare stays at 2 points with his 1 win. Thoughts about I think maybe a little bit above average, at least a little bit better than the usual House of Torture match here, Eric?
Yeah, I definitely thought this was above the average of the or usual House of Torture match, I should say. Thanks largely due to a really hot crowd who got really behind Hinare here. So I found the expected performers of the G1 to this point to be kind of who you would expect. I think Shingo's been the best, followed by maybe Okada and Osprey. Hinari has been up there. He may have
Mhm.
cracked my top 5 to this point, and I have never been that high on him before this tournament, but he is really delivering it every single night. And this was the first time I really saw the crowd just get behind him. And honestly, who's a better opponent for that than Evil, who
Mm.
will never have a crowd get behind him? So I was definitely a bit higher on this match than any of Evil's other matches to this point in the G1. On my almighty Okada scale, I went as far as to give this a Rainmaker, which is to say an average level match, and to give an Evil match an average, a solid recommendation. That is like the equivalent of a 5-star classic for the man in 2023. So well done.
we talk about the Okada scale here, but if we're talking about like grading on a curve and what the evil scale for that would be, yeah, this is a pretty high one as far as the evil goes. I'm going like a very like just shy of my 3-star whiskey. I'm going like a 2-star Auchentoshan with a good amount of nuts and snacks and whatnot on the side, which again is about as high as I can ever really go, for an evil match. And yeah, to the larger, more important point here about if we're looking at this tournament as a reintroduction or a showcasing of the new Hanare, I think that, the fire that he showed throughout this work and kind of powering through all of the HOT interference, which he knew was coming, did endear him to the crowd. And there were a couple of actually enjoyable wrestling sequences in this one. And obviously, it was a good deal shorter than that main event from a couple of days ago. So have to give some points for that. All right, we're moving over to the D block, where Hirooki Goto stands at 2 wins and 1 loss, and his opponent, Alex Coughlin, still has the goose egg, 0 wins and 3 losses, and is facing elimination in this match if he loses. Goto's ribs are heavily taped up after that match with Shane Haste, which kind of puzzled Karen and I when we were reviewing it as to its very short length, but it seems to have come out that, yeah, it was actually in that match during a cannonball spot from Haste that Goto's ribs were injured, but thankfully, nothing actually broken or fractured, so his tournament does continue. Chris Charlton and Kevin Kelly point out that there's some recent history with the War Dogs, of course, taking the strong tag team titles, but not the IWG tag team titles away from Bishamon at those Independence Day shows, as Coughlin jumps Goto as he's taking his robe off and knocks him around the guardrails to begin this match. Coughlin keeps working Goto's midsections with stretches and body blows. The two trade strikes as Goto begins to build a bit of steam with a backdrop suplex, but he's too wounded to follow up in a timely fashion. Coughlin hits a very nasty palm strike, escapes a GTR attempt, and strikes a blow to the wounded gut of Goto, and follows that up with a nice delayed jackhammer and right into the pin to pin Goto at 6 minutes and 23 seconds and stave off elimination, at least for today, with his first 2 points. Thoughts about the former Android, now War Dog, getting on the board and staying in the tournament?
So much like Goto's last match, it's obvious that they're working with some serious limitations in terms of that rib injury, and this was kind of a bit of it was only 6 minutes, but kind of an elongated squash match in which Goto didn't really get much in, a couple offensive hope spots towards the end, but it was just to get Coughlin on the board without doing much actual damage to Goto. So as the match itself, it didn't stand out to me at all. I gave it a red balloon Okada. It didn't quite meet the
Mm.
standards of the G1, but at the same time, I don't really hold it against either of these guys either, considering the circumstances. Coughlin hasn't really stood out for me in this tournament so far. He is a very talented professional wrestler, and he is incredibly strong. We saw that on display in his match against Jeff Cobb, but
Yeah.
not much since. So I'm hoping to see a bit more from him as this one goes on. Goto is still capable of delivering some solid singles matches, but with this current injury, I'm not sure we're gonna get it from him for the remainder of the tournament, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's Goto is one of those people where obviously we're not, at like Naito level or anything like that, but you have to sort of think that, time and tide wait for no man, and we are coming to that point at some way down the line with Goto. I will say that like I did like that the very, the pissed off, angry, unhinged War Dog stuff thrown around the chairs and everything like that. I like that that was kept to just the first 2 minutes of this match, although it was such a short match that sort of was that was like the first third of
It's
it.
33% of the match. It was actually horrible.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things where Karen and I have talked about this, right? We've seen this before in lots of G1s where when someone is coming in with sort of a new character, a new presentation, Gato really wants to make sure that that character gets across to the live crowds, right? And again, this is just the trade-off, right, of New Japan still being a live house-driven business, right? And it isn't necessarily the individual matches are not necessarily being structured so that chin stroking anoraks like you and I who are watching everything are seeing, complexity and variety. No, the main point is that every single person who might see an Alex Coughlin match live in person during this G1 tour sees the sort of, presentation of the War Dogs that we are getting here. I like the fact that he basically just kept the pressure on Goto, just keep targeting the midsection until you can get a killing strike, which he did. It didn't waste any time. Like you said, it was an elongated short squash, and it didn't really take up more time than it needed to. So yeah, I'm kind of, again, kind of the same as the previous Evil match, going with a healthy sized pour of 2-star Akantoshin with some extra snacks sprinkled along the side. I will also say that, if nothing else, this does possibly set up another title match, tag title match, with Bishamon facing the War Dogs later on. So that's maybe something that we can look forward to, possibly stateside. And that would not be the first of several possible future title matches that this card would set up as we head back to the C block with Mikey Nicholls taking on Shingo. Nichols sits at 1 win and 2 losses going into this match. Also, Shingo at 1 win and 2 losses, somewhat surprisingly. So much like Nichols' last match with Tama Tonga, things were pretty even to begin this match, with both men hitting shoulder strikes and shoulder blocks, dodging bigger maneuvers. Nichols knocks Shingo around on the floor for a bit and announces to the camera that he's a Dragon Slayer. He holds Shingo up for a delayed vertical suplex for, 15 seconds. It was a good long while there. Shingo ducks a sliding lariat and begins to get the crowd revved up, though no, it's not time yet. A senton and a vertical suplex gets a 2 count, and now it is time, exactly 10 minutes past 7 on a Wednesday night, as Chris Charlton points out. Nichols rallies with the superplex, and both men meet in the middle with headbutts and forearms, one of which opens Nichols up very much like he was opened up in his controversial match with Hanare at the beginning of the tournament. A DVD and a sliding lariat gets Nichols a 2 count. Shingo gets a DVD of his own. Both men hit lariats and pop up after 1 counts. Lots of heavy strikes in the middle. They run the ropes, and Shingo crashes into Nichols in a, I don't know what we would call this, a kind of a messy but relatively impactful version of a Luthez press, I guess. I don't know. And smothers the TMDK man for the win at 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Another relatively short match to move through the first 3 of them here, Eric.
Okay, so this was actually the match I was most interested in talking about because it was on its way to being a very solid match. I liked what I saw for the vast majority of it. And then we do the headbutt spots, and Mikey Nicholls legitimately busts himself open again. And then the match kind of goes off the rails a bit. These guys are no longer on the same page from this point forward. And I rewatched these last like 3 or 4 minutes a couple times because I wasn't sure exactly where some of these spots were going wrong. But like, I think the final exchange, which, like I said, I watched a couple of times to try to understand what was going on. And I think Shingo is going for a pumping bomber, and Nichols, I don't know if he was totally there at that point, and he kind of got messed up and went for the wrong move, and Shingo just tried to make the best of it. But I I want your thoughts because I'm not sure what went wrong here, and I'm worried that Mikey Nicholls perhaps knocked himself a bit loopy towards the end of this one.
Well, they did call the doctor in after the pin here. The actual, I can't remember his name. I apologize. But the doctor that the commentary desk has pointed out several times in the tournament thus far, they did call him in, but then he seemed to immediately be like, "Oh yeah, it's all fine. It's all good." Although then again, this is New Japan, not WWE or AEW, so who knows what a doctor is saying? "Oh yeah, you're fine." In New Japan means in comparison to North American promotions and some of the discourse that's been happening there. I mean, I'm not aware, to be honest, of the degree to which New Japan itself or Japanese wrestling fandom or Japanese wrestling culture does or does not participate in the sort of questions or discussions that, a lot of us in North America were having after the Hanare and Nichols match, and the question of like, these, headbutt. It didn't look to me as though any of these headbutts were quite as like heavy duty as the ones in that Hanare match. But I mean, it only really does take one, shoot headbutt to possibly mess someone up. In terms of the match itself, I did like it. I did like the intensity of it for the time that they did go. Nichols is someone who's never really moved the needle for me, but I like this very just kind of like solid, heavy hitting version of him that we are seeing in the G1. And of course, maybe that comes unfortunately with the in order to make an impression, you got to like leave some damage on yourself or somebody else. And we are now wading into the very kind of morally gray corners of what does and does not constitute an exciting and hard hitting New Japan match here. But yeah, no, like you, the finish did sort of come out of nowhere. Again, I have no problem with like a sudden surprise finish, but yeah, when it was something that obviously seemed to end with two guys on a different page, that is a little bit concerning. I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, no, your pumping bomber theory makes as much sense as anything as I could muster here, with just these two guys crashing into each other and Shingo falling over top of Nichols there. Full disclosure, I mean, in terms of actual match rating, I did like this a good deal. It's certainly not going to, crack my top 10 matches by the end, but I did think that this was a good match. As it happens, this is going to be my last review of these G1 shows, as my partner and I are heading down the West Coast. We're going to visit family down in the Bay Area. So I will be in San Francisco. And as folks may be aware, San Francisco is somewhat famous for having very, very generous free pours, where they just kind of like they keep chatting at you as they're pouring the bottle and everything. So I'm giving this a pretty solid San Francisco free pour of a 3-star Highland Park 12, if that makes any sense at all to our once again befuddled listeners.
So for me, it fell just below that standard. I did give it a red balloon Okada on the illustrious Okada scale, but this is high quality red balloon Okada.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it didn't. This isn't the bottom of the barrel red balloon Okada. This is red balloon Okada versus Tanahashi or something.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's good. It just I thought the last 3 minutes or so, unfortunately, threw this
Mm-hmm.
one a bit under.
Yeah, definitely. It's, I mean, again, to your point off the top there, Shingo is, I think, really bringing a lot of just, quality night in, night out. Personally, if we're talking about, the question of the Sonata title run and things like that, and are we willing to just sort of throw, anything at the wall? At some point down the line, I would love to see Shingo get another run with the main belt again, this time with, full crowds and not just clap crowds and everything like that. Because, he is somebody who, in addition to just delivering, for nerds like us and everything, he is someone who's, I think, fire in his promo style and everything really whips up a more general New Japan domestic audience as well. So who knows? Who knows? I mean, again, we were talking about the clock ticking on Goto. Shingo's probably got a few more years than Goto, but maybe not too many more. Speaking of folks who may not have many years left on them, we're moving over to a match between Bebop High School tag partners, at least occasional tag partners, between the aging ace Hiroshi Tanahashi and Toru Yano. Tanahashi is sitting at 1 win and 2 losses. Yano winless, 0 wins and 3 losses, facing elimination as he heads into this match as well. So Yano goes for a sneak roll up just before the bell rings, which Tana admonishes him for, reminding, "Look, this is the G1. This is serious business." And Yano apologizes, but almost immediately a roll of tape is ferreted out of his trunks. We get some standing switches and a couple of amateur takedowns from both men. Tanahashi gets a running forearm and a body slam to set up and miss the somersault senton. And as Kelly and Charlton sort of highlights, he pauses for a second before going for the somersault senton, which has the commentary wondering, okay, does he just not want to squish kind of a lovable frenemy in Toru Yano, or is it because he just knows he cannot deliver this sort of aerial move as smoothly as before? Yano gets his first corner pad attack of the tournament in, and of course, through the transitive property of dragon screwing the pad, which Tana is holding onto, Tana takes the effects of the dragon screw as well. Tana is sent into an exposed turnbuckle, escapes a power bomb attempt, and blocks a low blow, but we get a ref bump, and Yano going after Tana with a chair. Tana punches the chair out of Yano's hand, hits a sling blade, and makes his way to the top to successfully deliver a high fly flow and eliminate the Sublime Master Thief from tournament contention at 7 minutes and 45 seconds. Do you have any? I can't imagine that we have any thoughts about Yano's elimination, but maybe we're maybe more thinking about the continued question of Tanahashi's ability to hang at G1 levels, even in a Toru Yano match here, Eric.
Yeah. As far as Yano's elimination, I know he was a strong contender for many to win the whole thing this year, but it just wasn't in the cards. I'm sure he'll be back again next year with a bunch of new schemes. I can't say too much. For Toru Yano, this was probably as much as the closest thing to a straight up wrestling match that you'll see out of him in this tournament. And As far as Tanahashi's concerned, honestly, this was a bit of a sad one for me to watch
Yeah.
because Tanahashi was really struggling with some of these spots. Like at one point, they do like the typical catapult into the corner, and it was so tough on Tanahashi's knees to do a catapult spot, and it was definitely a bit sad. Throughout the tournament, I do think Tanahashi's been fine. Like he hasn't had any bad matches, I don't think, nor anything to his standards of greatness either. Just kind of a lot of mid tier performances, which is
Hmm.
okay. He's here because he's still one of the three most popular guys in the entire company, and they still desperately need him on these cards to fill seats. But I did think this one was this wasn't an enjoyable match for me. I was just kind of sad throughout. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Um, this was a Yano match through and through, of course. I will say that it was one that I think demanded a little bit more physicality, or at least ended up with a little bit more physicality from Tana than was maybe necessary. You know, like
yeah.
you compare like, a lot of the previous matches where it's like, okay, let's just, get down here and grapple a little bit, brother. And just sort of, obviously everybody is working to protect him throughout this tournament and keep him from exposing himself. But no, they were actually like, he was running the ropes. Like you said, he was doing the slingshot spot. And it was sort of like, do we need to be doing this or is this actually necessary? I'm not really sure. Yeah, a little bit over a 2-star Akintoshin for me, a bit more physical than the average Yano match is, but obviously not up to the standard or the snuff that we expect for Tanahashi either. Up next, then, okay, the one that I certainly had circled heading into this card, and even beforehand, when the schedule of who would be reviewing which G1 shows was announced. When I saw this one, boom, I thought, yeah, okay, I'm excited that I've got this one on here because we are looking at a still winless Tomohiro Ishii. 0 wins and 3 losses, taking on the Mad King, Eddie Kingston, who comes into this match with 2 wins and 1 loss. This is the third singles match between these two. However, it is the first in Japan. We were just sort of saying at the beginning of the last match, oh, Tana might have been trying to remind Yano that, oh, yeah, this is the G1. But this is the match where this really applies. We've had some decent matches off the first half of this card here, some comedy, a lot of heel shtick and everything. But by God, this is the G1 climax, and you gotta hope that these two are going to lean into it and that this match will deliver. Let's find out. So before they even lock out, Kingston is showing off the damage that he's taken, not just from this tournament, but with his battles with the Blackpool Combat Club back in North America before the tournament even started. He's stretching out his back and his injured elbow, and we get our first test of strength, if I'm not mistaken, in the whole tournament with the two of them knuckling up. There are a lot of Irish whip reversals, then a chop exchange immediately recalling their first singles meeting at the All Out 0 hour, though this exchange does not go quite as long as that one, with Ishii hitting a shoulder tackle and then kicking away at Kingston's back. Ishii hits a side suplex as some of the crowd's getting behind the very wounded Kingston. Kingston hits a knee to the neck from the second rope. That looked pretty cool. And an exploder. There's another much longer chop exchange. Eddie drops the straps down in order to give Ishii some better noise out of his chest. Kingston is looking frustrated that he's not giving as good as he is getting, hitting Ishii with these chops from the injured elbow, but then being hit back in return. But eventually he does get Ishii to stagger and ultimately drop. Kingston gets a half Nelson suplex and a sliding elbow for 2 at the 10-minute mark. Ishii counters an Hurricane attempt with a clubbing forearm and follows up with 2 Germans, as you can see how red and abraded Ishii's chest is getting. Ugh, gross, but also wonderful at the same time. Eddie dodges a sliding lariat and hits a standing lariat of his own and a backdrop suplex for 2, and he keeps the Kawada tribute going with a stretch plum, which he ultimately turns into a lateral press, which Ishii barely gets a shoulder up from. Ishii ducks an Hurricane and hits Eddie with a diving headbutt for 2 as we are getting into the closing stretch, and the crowd is really starting to get into this hard-hitting affair. Ishii hits an Enziguri, goes for a sliding lariat, but Kingston counters that with an Enziguri of his own. Ishii hits a running lariat, but Kingston pops up at 1. Ishii gets another running lariat, this time for 2. Kingston fights out of a brainbuster attempt, hits a pair of Hurricanes the way that he beat Henare, but no, Ishii still kicks out at 2, and we're now at the 15-minute mark. Ishii then hits, I don't even know what to call this, a one-kneed version of a code breaker or something like that is about as close as I can describe this kind of running tackle takedown that he gives to Kingston. Then follows that up with a sliding lariat for 2, lifts Kingston up for the vertical drop brainbuster, which gets a big cheer from the crowd as the Stone Pitbull covers the Mad King for the 1, 2, 3 at 16 minutes and 15 seconds, with the commentary noting that we will likely be looking at a stateside rematch in defense of Kingston's strong openweight title something soon. Thoughts about this match, Eric, and whether or not it possibly knocked out Shingo and Hanare for you as your match of the tournament thus far?
This was definitely my match of the show, and I thought of Eddie and Ishii's 3 matches to this point. I thought this was by far the best of the bunch. It didn't knock out Shingo and Hinare as my match of the tournament, but it is firmly positioned in my top 5. I really enjoyed this one. A classic Tomohiro Ishii match, and I think Eddie Kingston was having a hell of a time throughout this
Oh,
entire thing.
yeah, no, this was exactly what you'd hoped it would be when the blocks are announced. Like yourself, I do think that it was the best of the 3 singles matches that we've had, and at least for me, it did eclipse. I also too had Shingo Henare as my favorite match of the tournament thus far, and yeah, just the extra character stuff that Kingston is able to bring, the extra selling, just lending a little bit of extra pathos, just puts it over the edge for me. I don't know that I can necessarily go for my full 5-star Port Ellen rating on this, but man, there was just so much to love here. A couple of years ago, when I was doing written coverage of the G1, I did a little bit of very nerdy, deep, I won't bore you with the details, kind of content analysis of the ratings of Ishii's G1 matches and found that, okay, fine, maybe in 2021, 2022, we are starting to see a point where Ishii is maybe not quite able to turn in the sort of night after night after night performance that he was, say, in the 2018 G1, where he was picking up a lot of the slack for Red Balloon Okada there. But when he's in there with the right opponent, my God, does Ishii still stand up and deliver? For Kingston's own part, I thought that this match here, and again, forgive me for waxing a bit philosophical here, Eric, but Kingston's performance here epitomized that wonderful quote that we got from Minoru Suzuki a couple of years ago about how wrestlers like Jon Moxley and Zack Sabre are great because there are things they cannot do, because there are obvious deficiencies in their game. And as a result, they stand out more. They are more compelling pro wrestlers as a result of that. And that's very much the case with Eddie Kingston. He doesn't have the cardio. He doesn't have the natural athleticism. And in a match like this, those things are strengths because they underline how grueling an endurance contest like this is, even when it's, quote, only going 16 minutes long. I mean, I can think of all manner of G1 main events that went, 25, 27 matches or minutes rather, that had a fraction of the drama and intensity of this. And in part, that's because Kingston knows I don't have 30 minutes in me, right? I've got 20 minutes to try to chop the Stone Pitbull down. And if I don't, Ishii is going to outlast me and kill me with a brainbuster, which is ultimately what ends up happening here. So yeah, great stuff. Very healthy glass of 4-star Glenfarclas 17 in a boisterous, rowdy New York bar with whatever sorts of snacks on the side that you might want. And at least as of right now, my new pick for my personal match of the tournament.
I will give this a Tenru Okada, Black Trunks, grumpy old man Okada on the Okada scale. I really enjoyed this. Eddie's best match of, you know what? This is on the high end of Eddie Kingston matches I can remember. And that is
Mhm.
high praise because I quite enjoy Eddie Kingston. For Tomohiro Ishii, another night at the office. This man is incredible. What can I say?
It's wonderful that we sort of say that, right? We just take so often, on these reviews, I find myself sort of saying, yeah, I know exactly what I expected out of Ishii. And I do worry that we are, that we do sort of take everything that he does for granted. I mean, obviously, there are individual moments that I think, we can always remember, the biting the ropes with Omega and things like that. But just the day in, day out quality that this guy ensures, he's bringing, right? Like, again, to kind of go back to the point that, like, look, New Japan is a live gate business, right? Again, the average person who's going to a New Japan show might not be watching 20 or 25 Tomohiro Ishii singles matches in a year the way you and I are. And those people make sure that they get their money's worth for that one time that they see him every year. All right, we move over to a match that did not really stand out to me, at least when I was looking at it on paper, and maybe didn't for the first few minutes of it, in a contest between Shane Haste and Tetsuya Naito. So before the bell, Naito asks for a hat exchange, a la, the sort of jersey or scarf exchanges that you will see in football. So Naito is flipping between his LIJ cap and Haste's orange top hat before ultimately tossing the latter into the crowd. So a very shtick-heavy G1 for Naito continues, at least for now. Haste drops Naito with a dropkick and wears Naito's LIJ cap for a minute before tossing that into the crowd. Naito takes Haste to the floor and hits a neckbreaker on the guardrail and keeps wrenching at the neck even after Shane Haste makes it back inside. And this would sort of go on to be the thread of this match, this early injury or early damage given to Haste's neck. Haste eventually begins to turn the tide with a drop kick, a reverse power slam, and a Falcon Arrow for 2. Naito counters that with an arm drag and then a drop kick and some elbows to the neck, and then an Esperanza, which keeps the pressure on the neck. Haste holds Naito off with a side suplex. Both men trade forearms to the neck. Naito spits in Haste's face before hitting a tornado DDT. Haste counters that by striking away at Naito's leg and goes for his Bomb Valley Death, which is his fireman's chokeslam, or a chokeslam out of fireman's carry. Naito reverses that into a partial Destino, but a lariat from Haste lays both men out at 2. Naito keeps working the neck. Haste goes for another Bomb Valley Death, but Naito counters that into a Destino, and I will say a much better looking Destino than the one he got on Goto a few days ago. But Haste kicks out of a very clean Destino at 2, in a very shocking kick out for me, at least. Naito then goes for another Destino, but as he's going up, Haste transitions Naito into the fireman's carry position, allowing him to hit that very rarely seen Bomb Valley Death finisher and pin Tetsuya Naito at 13 minutes and 45 seconds. I don't know about you, Eric. Like I said, was not really looking forward to this one, did not think too much of it. And the beginning of it wasn't really doing too much more for me. But the last few minutes of this, I thought got really interesting.
I will go as far as to say this was my second favorite match of the night. I thought Naito went all in on making Shane Haste right here. He was trying to heal it up from the beginning to the end, and as much as he may try to play the bad guy, the crowd will never turn on him at this point. He is by far the most popular person in this company, so that's never happening. But he did succeed in getting the crowd behind Shane Haste, who went from a guy who was getting really no reactions in any of his matches to this point to an incredibly over babyface who's very sympathetic against the dickhead Naito doing his whole thing. So I really enjoyed this match. I thought this was the biggest match of Shane Haste's career to this point, really. And solid effort from Tetsuya Naito, who's been a bit all over the place so far in the G1 this year. I really liked this match against Jeff Cobb, but the Goto match and the Yano match weren't standouts. This is back to form for Naito, who was one of the standouts in the G1 last year. So I know he still has it in him.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, his especially in the finals and everything like that, or the quarter or the semifinals of the G1 last year. When the time comes, he does still have 1 or 2 matches a year in him. Yeah, the first half of this one was just very kind of okay. We're getting like laconic, tranquilo, shticky Naito and everything, to the point that I was almost asking myself, like, is Tanahashi actually gonna like outwork and outbump Naito on this night? But no. Towards the end, things really began to pay off. So I'll go with a slightly large, pour of 3-star Highland Park, but maybe one that takes a few minutes to aerate and bloom. Sometimes certain whiskeys you got to let them sit in the glass for a few minutes, before they really come into their own. And that's what this was for me. All right. So in our semi-final, it's a renewal of hostilities between Tama Tonga and an undefeated David Finlay, a feud that was fought over the never open weight title and built to a very, very one-sided demolishing and stretcher chopping of Tama Tonga, which took him out of New Japan for several months. Because of that, Tama jumps Finlay the second he walks through the curtain, and the bell rings before either man has made it into the ring, in a continuation of a trend in this year's G1, which has certainly bothered Karen and I to no end. Before we get into the match itself, Eric, where do you sort of stand right now in terms of all things New Japan reffing, kayfabe rules, the beginnings of, when these matches do begin and whatnot, general Bullet Club shtick and antics? How does something like this strike you as somebody who, with an MMA background, appreciates the sports-like presentation of New Japan?
No, I definitely hate it. I hate all the run-ins. Like it's really taken away from a lot of the War Dogs matches for me. Not so much David Finlay, who actually keeps it fairly clean throughout most of his matches. But and you know what? I will say in this exception with the babyface being the guy to go on the attack at the beginning, it does play off their brutal last match. So
Mhm.
I didn't necessarily have a problem with it here, but the overall theme of it throughout the G1 and its overuse has been a bit rough, and it's taken away from what would otherwise be like the guy I'm particularly referring to here is Gabriel Kidd.
Yeah.
Gabe Kidd, he is a very talented wrestler. He has a lot going for him, but right now I think the whole attacking everyone before the matches, flipping off the crowd every 6 seconds thing, he's really overdoing it. And it's taking away
Yeah.
from his matches for me personally.
Yeah, and I think that in a case like this, where there actually is like legit blood feud reasons for a face like Tama to just charge right after Finley before the match even gets started or before Finley makes it into the ring, because we've seen Gabe Kidd do that in every single match, because we've seen Coughlin, throw a bunch of muck and plunder around beforehand. It kind of takes the shine off of it when it is actually earned and deserved, as it is in this case. It's not, necessarily, it's certainly not Tama Tonga's fault that that spot has been played up there, but it doesn't necessarily have the impact that it might have if we hadn't seen this happen once or twice already on this one card alone. Okay, so anyway, we like I said, the bell rings with both men on the floor, and we brawl into the crowd. Tama feigns going into the ring, but runs back into the crowd to beat Finley down some more. Tama goes to suplex Finley off the stage, but is shoved off it by Finley, who then goes after Tama's knee with a chair and keeps wrenching it both in and out of the ring. Tama gets some breathing room with a drop kick at the 5-minute call and begins to fire up with a lariat and a splash in the corner for 2. Finley reverses a Tongan twist with the Irish curse backbreaker for 2. Lots of quick reversals and strikes going here as we're working at a very frenetic pace. Tama gets the SRC, but the injury to the knee slows his approach to climb up to the top for the Supreme Flow follow-up, giving Finley just enough time to get his knees up. Storytelling. Finley manages to toss Tama into the ropes and snap his knee in the process, which sets up a deep sharpshooter, while Kelly notes that Jay White himself just used that same targeted knee rope toss against FTR. And good freaking call on Kevin Kelly, because I certainly watched that match, but I did not notice that little wink and a nod there that we are getting across the Pacific, to different Bullet Club factions. Tama tosses White outside, hits a tope, and is now able to hit the Supreme Flow back inside. Gunstun into Oblivion and the DST/J Driller. All of those finishers are countered by each opponent. Finley gets a Blue Thunder Bomb for 2 and a Dominator for 2. There's a bunch of mid-ring striking from both guys. Finley hits a spear and goes for a power bomb, but Tama reverses it and barely keeps the Rebel down for 3 in a roll-up at 14 minutes and 22 seconds. Finley immediately beats Tama down seconds after the bell, finally hits that power bomb that he went for a couple of times during the actual match, and has Goto hold him up for a strike with the shillelagh. Thoughts about a match that I thought jammed a hell of a lot in to less than 15 minutes, Eric?
I enjoyed this far more than I enjoyed their last match, which, of course, in a sense, was a bit of an angle because the whole thing was it was this huge beatdown of Tama Tonga that was going to take him out for months. But the thing was, the match sucked and it dragged on for fucking ever. So it was brutal to sit through. This was the exact opposite, a really high pace between the two. I liked the match. At the end, I'm not sure like the beatdown at the end was necessary. It kind of I thought it took away from Tama Tonga's win, which I get that they're trying to keep David Finlay strong, but the thing is, it makes it feel like this win occurred more just to make the math at the end of the tournament work, or
Right.
to add suspense more than it was done for the booking purpose of giving Tama Tonga a big babyface moment. So I was a bit disappointed in that, but it's kind of par for the course at this Bullet Club stuff. I give this a Rainmaker Okada on the illustrious Okada scale. It's on the high end. Like I said, I really like the pace. I thought this was a good follow up to their story
Mhm.
throughout the year, but it didn't quite hit that next level for me either.
I think I might be a little bit higher on this one than you. I mean, I take your point about the beatdown, needing to kind of keep Finley strong and everything, and I certainly think like we just saw with the Shane Haste match, right? There's going to be some matches where, there is a little bit of an upset, just to make sure that the math all works out when we shake things out at the end of the tournament. I mean, if nothing else, this, like the Goto defeat earlier on, maybe we're looking at a revival of the of Tama getting a shot at the Never title, possibly stateside in the medium to near future. The kind of the question of, is Finlay going to be positioned for another at least shot at the title, sometime, maybe not in the immediate, time between now and Wrestle Kingdom, but obviously you just look at how much screen time the Bullet Club is getting, and the fact that even though nothing was really answered a couple of nights ago, obviously Finlay's rule over even the House of Torture seems to at least nominally still be in place there. So there's obviously a real interest in keeping Finlay strong, and possibly, right, they might be wanting to move him back firmly into that main event scene and the main heavyweight title picture. So possibly getting the Never title back onto Tama might be something that we're looking forward to here. In terms of the match itself, given how kind of long this feud had gone, and that, like you said, the point about the previous match, I wasn't really looking forward to this, but I thought it really delivered. It was fast, it was mean, it was intense. It had like really, just clean, clear, and logical work with the knee. Like, I hope I didn't sound sarcastic when I was saying storytelling there. I meant that legitimately. Like, that's exactly the sort of thing that, you need to do if you want to set up the fact that Finley's going to be able to get the knees up to block, to block the Supreme Flow there. And I just thought that like both guys really busted their asses and just worked, to get as much time as they could in there. So I am giving this just barely scratches my 4-star Glenn Farkless 17 territory. All right, that brings us to our main event. And again, if we're talking about a bit of a blood feud before, maybe not a blood feud in this case, but a contest or a feud that has had a number of very exciting and hard-fought matches just this year alone, with Jeff Cobb, the undefeated 3-0 contender, taking on the television title champion Zack Sabre Jr., also undefeated. Something has to break unless we go to a time limit draw, which has happened in at least one of these men's matches in the past year. Cobb is out first, but Zack is in full like baby kissing rock star baby face mode. He's striding through the crowd, fist bumping people, high-fiving everyone. Charlton notes that Zack is a true socialist, a man of the people, whereas Kevin Kelly repeats the old cliche that he'll become a capitalist by 40, to which I would say, hey, look at the gray in Keir Starmer's hair, or closer to us in Canada, in Jagmeet Singh's beard. But anyway, let's not get politics into this. Let's get into the third contest this year between the two undefeated men in the D block. So these two lock up and trade hip tosses and leg scissors. Lots of nice chain wrist work to start, which the crowd certainly appreciates, including Cobb cartwheeling out of a wrist lock. Zack makes the mistake of trying to shoulder tackle Cobb not once, not twice, but thrice, which ends with Cobb leapfrogging and hitting a flying shoulder tackle to the smaller man. Cobb presses the advantage outside with strikes and guardrail crashes. So no, not even this theoretically technical and amateur-focused match can escape the gravitational pull of the guardrail in the G1. Zack applies a flying guillotine, but Cobb immediately belly to belly suplexes him away. Cobb keeps control back in the ring. Zack once again tries to tackle Cobb to no avail, but dodges a spear and gets a tornado DDT to catch his breath for a moment. Cobb drops to his back, he sticks and moves a bit with his strikes, turns a spin cycle attempt into a sleeper. Cobb drops to his back, but Zack holds on to go for the armbar, which Zack has been using a lot in this tournament, with the idea being that even just a basic armbar, once it's properly applied by a technician like Zack Sabre, is going to net and immediate submission. But Cobb is quickly at the ropes to break the armbar at the 10-minute mark. Zack gets another flying guillotine, but Cobb once again suplexes out of it, this time with a vertical. Zack tries to lariat Cobb down, which Cobb is absolutely having none of. Cobb tries to pull Zack out of the corner into a spin cycle, but drops Zack, and they sort of have to redo the spot in the middle of the ring. Zack counters a Tour of the Islands attempt with a crucifix roll-up, with which he beat Cobb at Dominion, and follows up with some manner of wacky submission. I'm not sure if this one has a name. If not, who's to say? But Cobb is once again at the ropes. There's a quick set of clutch and roll-up reversals to get 2 counts for each man as we hit the 15-minute mark. Both men talk trash at one another from the corners, trade German suplexes. Zack hits a penalty kick, but Cobb then hits his F5000, that extra spin and extra rotation version of the F5, to set up a tour of the islands and hand Zack his first defeat and stand alone with 8 points atop the D block. Thoughts about the, I guess, now third match that we've had from these two in just the last few months, Eric?
I thought it was a good match. Their styles clashed in an interesting way. Of course, Zack's technical style, it's always fun to see people work that. While at the same time, Jeff Cobb is an absolute freak who can just do incredible feats of strength on the regular. They got a bit ambitious at times, and as a result, I thought, especially in, I'll say, the last 5 minutes of the match, there were a lot of miscues, which unfortunately dampened my enjoyment of it
Mm-hmm.
somewhat. But at the same time, I thought they recovered from everything pretty well, and I did enjoy this match.
Yeah, the fact that building upon the previous matches that they'd had, I liked the fact that at least part of the story here for me that I was taking from this was that after having beaten Cobb the previous time, you had Zack being a little bit cockier going into this match, starting with the crowd work that I was talking about, the peacocking there, and then sort of deciding to like challenge Cobb head on with a lot of these like lariat or like suplex attempts and strike exchanges and whatnot, obviously, which he's going to lose to the bigger man, rather than as he did when he won, very much picking his spots, going in for submissions, kind of, dodging and weaving and trying to evade the bigger strikes. And, he loses as a result of it. I think across those 3 matches, we've seen really good chemistry from both. And yeah, fine. We got a little bit crossed up with the spin cycle spot. But apart from that, I thought everything else here, vegan buttery spread smooth, good proper 4+ star glass of Glenfarclas 17 for me, with maybe a little bit of Hawaiian macadamia nuts on the side. So after the match, in Japanese, Cobb then says he needs a minute to catch his breath in the Tokyo Heat, but that the G1 is even hotter than the Tokyo Heat, and he thanks Korakuen Hall. The crowd is very appreciative of his speaking Japanese to them in the post-match. Backstage, Cobb sings some Bob Marley and then says that the G1 is his redemption story, congratulates Zack on a good fight, does a bit of a dolphin impression in anticipation of his match with Yano in the
Oh wow!
Dolphin
I
Arena.
can't believe I missed this. I forgot to check out the interviews this time, and I'm really regretting it now.
I'm not even going to attempt to do the little thing that Cobb did here, but he did it twice. Says that he is ready for Yano's shenanigans after he used them to beat Cobb in last year's G1. He laments the fact that the G1 schedule meant that the New Japan roster had to miss the Sapporo Beer Festival, but he will have some Sapporos on ice tonight. Oh my goodness. So there we have it. In terms of overall match recommendations, we might be looking at things a little bit differently here, Eric. I'm not sure. I think we're very much in agreement that Ishii and Kingston is by far and away our match of the night. Like I said, it's
Yep.
my match of the tournament so far. So really, really large recommendation on that one. I'm wanting to sort of throw recommendations on both Tama and Finley and our main event with Zack and Cobb. But are you kind of maybe different in that regard?
Naito and Haste was definitely my second favorite match of the
Mm-hmm.
night. I would probably go there for Cobb and Zack as well. Finley versus Tonga wasn't quite there for me. I thought there was just a bit too much going on in that one, but I did enjoy the last like 4 matches. Like this was
Mm-hmm.
very much the tale of a show split in half for me because the first 4 matches really did not do it for me,
Yeah, yeah.
and the last 4 really did. I enjoyed the last half of the show quite a bit.
Yeah, it really did pick up on the last half. There wasn't anything especially egregious, I don't think, in the first half. Like I
No,
said, even the evil match was a bit better
yeah.
than your average evil match is there. So I guess we're kind of going with, like I said, Ishii and Kingston and Zack and Cobb as our shared agreements, and then individual recommendations perhaps for Tama and Finley and Naito and Haste. Okay, so all of that being said, we are now just more than halfway through our G1 competition, or at least the regular block G1 competition. So let's take a look at some standings and see what's going on here. In the C block, I believe if I'm doing my math correctly here, Tama Tonga is your block leader right now because he holds the tiebreaker over Finley, who holds a tiebreaker over Evil, if I'm reading this correctly. Behind that, those three men tied at 6, you've got Shingo Takagi and Eddie Kingston with 4 points. Mikey, Nichols, Henare, and Tomohiro Ishii all on the board with 2 points apiece. In the D block, after defeating Zack in the main event, Cobb stands alone atop the D block with 8 points. Sabre right behind him with 6 points. Bit of a long jam with Tanahashi, Goto, Naito, and Haste all with 4 points. Alex Coughlin on the board for the first time today with 2 points. And like we said before, the Sublime Master Thief unfortunately eliminated. Not going to be able to make a go of it this year as Yano is out with 0 points. Of course, there's the G1 standings, but we all know what you're really here for. It's the G1 contest standings over at Post Wrestling. Let's move over to there. Before we get into the actual standings of the contest itself, let's take a look at the kind of, the odds or the favorites and the upsets as would have been tabulated by the fantastic Chris Engler on today's card. You've got 87% of people correctly guessing that Shingo Takagi would beat Mikey Nichols. 71% of people correctly guessing that Evil would be able to use his chicanery to go over Hanare. Tanahashi might be old, but he's still our favorite to beat Yano by a 2/3 margin. Deadlock, 50-50%. A bit of a coin flip here between Goto and Coughlin, who ultimately takes it. Then we get into some upsets. Not much of an upset here, with 49% of people guessing that Tonga would get a win back over Finley. 44% of people going with Jeff Cobb. 43% going with Tomohiro Ishii to go over Kingston. And a massive, not quite block breaking, but a pretty big upset here, with basically only 1 in 20 people giving Shane Haste a chance at defeating Tetsuya Naito. So, man, if you picked that, you had a chance at getting the perfect club. But otherwise, I don't know how many people we will have in the perfect club today. But let's scroll back up here. We've already done the actual standings. Here we go. The top listener contest standings once again, and now even pulling ahead of everybody. It's still Jeremy Firestone in first place with 48 points, a 3-point lead over second place. That's Eric from Cork. So congratulations, Jeremy, on holding it down thus far. We'll see how the second half of the tournament goes for you. We've got a big log jam in third place with B from NY, DS1972, Jake D, Mark Butler, Optimus Maximus, and Tom H, all doing very well for themselves with 44 points. And then at least 3 people, Anthony C, Jimmy L, and Nick XT. Sorry, I've tripped up on that one before. I apologize. All with 43 points. Moving over to everybody's favorite, the Post Family contest standings. Lowdown Davey P. Davey Portman himself still up at the front. Only scored 4 points today, so things are maybe tightening a bit, but he still at least holds a 2-point lead over Brandon Thurston and Brandon from New Jersey. The Brandon dyad there locked in second place at 39. Myself, yourself, Eric, John Kleinchester, all following up with 38 points. Let's see, how did we do? We each got 5 right today, so I'll take that. Nobody actually. Yeah, it looks like nobody in the Post. In the Post family got any higher than 5 points today. So I'm perfectly happy with that result. I'm guessing that this means, sorry, I didn't even check this before, but I have to assume that we are not seeing. Yeah, I'm guessing absolutely nobody got a perfect 8 today with the big Shane Haste upset there. So sorry, I apologize for not doing that earlier. Moving on down the line, we've got Brad Comping, Bruiser Brady, Braden Harrington himself, and John Cino all at 37. Neil Flanagan at 36. John Pollock and John Pine, again, the Brandons and the Johns stuck together here. They've got 35 points. WH tied with Randobot at 30, as long with Wei Ting. So we've got a 3-way race for the bottom as WH continues to try to put over this whole no, you got to be right at the bottom sort of thing as he tries to save face as his picks continue to not show up for him at all. So obviously, the rest of the crew will be keeping you posted throughout the remainder of this G1. Tomorrow, it will be John and Wei to walk you through A and B block action from the Ota City Gym in Tokyo. I should not have closed that window because that was the window that had my actual listings of there it is. Here we go. Sorry, I apologize, everybody. Oh, this is terrible audio.
Don't
Apologies,
worry, it
everybody.
happens to us all on occasion.
As I pull up the A and B block action that John and Wei will be covering tomorrow, you've got Shota Umino taking on Chase Owens, Yoshihashi taking on Tai Chi, Kaito Kiyomiya versus Gabe Kidd, Tonga Loa versus Great Okan, Hikuleo versus Yota Tsuji, El Phantasmo versus Kenta, Sonata versus Ren Narita, and then in your main event, Kazuchika Okada versus Will Ospreay. If you've been saying to yourself up until this point, oh man, none of those matches, nothing is really lighting my world on fire. Well, bang, there you go. Arguably the most hotly anticipated match of the tournament coming to you tomorrow from the Ota City Gymnasium.
I have a feeling by this time tomorrow, we're going to all have a collective new match of the tournament.
Yeah. I mean, what can we say about the run that Ospreay is on? And to your point earlier about kind of reminding us of the wonderfulness of Tenryu styled dickhead Okada. There's a real chance here, I think, for a real excellent babyface performance that gets the crowd on his side as Ospreay continues to look down his nose dismissively at him. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You tell me. Is this the moment? I mean, is this the right form or venue for Okada to finally be defeated cleanly by Ospreay?
No, I think this would be a huge waste because I feel like the end of this current 3-year Will Ospreay character arc saga is him beating Kazuchika Okada clean. And for him to do that in a 20-minute G1 match, it doesn't feel quite right, but I feel like it is probably time for him to not lose. It's time for him to go the distance at the very least.
I
And
can't remember if I should. I really was not thinking about the tie thing enough when I was doing my contest entry, but this is absolutely one that I think is going to a tie right now.
So do I. It would be pretty shocking for me if Will Ospreay won this. In fact, in his post match interview just a couple nights ago, he kind of says, "I truly think I can beat Okada, but I don't think I can do it in 20 minutes," which kind of tells you he's not going to get the win. I don't see Okada beating him in less than 20 minutes. It's possible, but I do think this one's probably going to go to a draw.
Yep. I think that's the smart money. But one way or the other, should be a hell of a show. And like I said, regardless of whether we had Hanare and Shingo or Kingston and Ishii picked up either of your top picks or whatever your top for the tournament has been thus far, dear listener, might have some very strong competition for it coming tomorrow. And like I said, John and Wei will have that covered for you sometime tomorrow. So that does it for myself and Eric Marcotte. Like I said, that does it for me for the actual tournament coverage. I'm taking off for vacation for a couple of weeks, but I very much look forward to keeping track of all things G1 related that yourself, Eric, Karen, WH, and John and Wei will be covering in the days to come. Any other last comments or things you'd care to plug before we take off here?
No, I have nothing to plug, nothing to say. I think we went through absolutely everything today, Bruce.
All right. It's been a treat to finally get to do one of these shows with you, Eric. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. Take care.